Welcome and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this final presentation in our Spotlight series on using NOCTI assessment score report data for your program improvement. My name's Ashley. I'm the Customer Care Coordinator at NOCTI, and I'll be facilitating the webinar today, where we'll be diving right into the score report data for a deeper analysis. I'd like to introduce our presenter for this session, Todd Luke, who's the president of Max Teaching. Todd is a former CTE student, instructor, and administrator in Pennsylvania. He attended Max Teaching training in 2001, and he worked part-time for Max Teaching for 7 years before becoming the vice president in 2008. In 2017, he became the president and CEO of Max Teaching. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Everyone, please welcome Todd Luke.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Ashley said, we have done multiple presentations on diving into the data, and if some of the things we talk about today and you look at them and say, I don't think I've ever seen that, if you actually go to the NOCTI website and look in their resource page, you'll find the previous recordings of the webinars as well as some articles that we've written on this idea. We also did a spotlight series writing from one of the schools in Pennsylvania, York, where we looked at how their school performance profile scores went from the low 60s to the high 80s, almost into the 90s, by actually using a continuous improvement model. So today is really about the culmination of, okay, we looked at our pretest data and we did some analysis. Again, this really wasn't designed to evaluate and judge students, teachers, schools, or anything from my perspective. It's really a diagnostic and prescriptive tool that you can get better. So we analyze the data, we make some interpretations. What are we seeing? We implement some things, we change some things. Maybe you wrote an SLO around the idea of changing one of the standards. And so you want to look at that information, you want to apply a treatment, and then you want to give a post-test and see if what you did worked. And if it worked, then do it again. If it didn't work, say it didn't work and try something else. The worst thing that we can do sometimes is nothing, because the data is definitely saying something, and we just need to get a little more friendly with it. So there's so many different ways that you can actually look at the data for trends between pre-test, post-test. You can look at previous years. You can look at a lot of different things to identify trends within the standards. And I'm going to show you maybe 3 or 4 in this presentation, and they are by no means not the end-all, but they're a pretty good place to start. This is kind of like a dashboard, and you can do this. What you're looking at is an auto collision repair report, and there are actually 3 years there. You can see the standards listed on the left-hand side, and you're looking at pre and post-test both. So the columns are staggered for each of the standards. So if we look at safety, we can see in 13-14 we had a 49, a 50, and a 52. Now, what do those numbers mean? When you get custom reports from me, I actually, as part of the report, calculate the total number of students that took the test and the total number of questions for each standard that they answered correctly. And so, kind of like we're doing a class mean, I want to know how much of this stuff the whole class is getting correct. So we're doing a comparison. If we look at that 49, 50, and 52, there's a couple of things. When you look at quality management or a total quality system, you're looking for something being in control and you're looking for something being capable. I mean, there's 2 aspects to that. In control would mean the numbers don't really differentiate a whole lot. So it basically says over a 3-year period, I delivered this, and the results are pretty close to the same, which is kind of what you see with the 49, the 50, and the 52. When you look at the post-test for that same standard, we got a 63. We took a little dip down to a 55, and then we went back up to a 64. And you can run 3-year averages on those numbers. Some schools I work with do that. So a lot of different ways to look at the numbers. Now, it's also color-coded. And the only reason I color-coded is so at a glance you can look at this thing and you say, okay, I can spot colors really easily. So if there's an instance where the students answered 50% of the questions or fewer, I color that red. If they answer between 51 and 79, it's yellow. If they answer 80% or more, it gets green. And as we look for some dashboards, you'll see some different colors popping up. That aligns with the Pennsylvania teacher effectiveness model. And so we would basically say, okay, anything in the red needs improvement, anything in the yellow is proficient, and anything green is distinguished. So in Pennsylvania, when we look at the Danielson model, the concept behind the Danielson model is that you will live in proficiency and you will dabble in distinguished. So there's one example of a way that you can put all this information together so that you can see exactly where you are within the data set. This is another one, and I know the numbers are small, but it's a culinary program. You don't really need to look at the numbers. I just want you to look at the colors. You can notice in this program, in 13-14, there was only one area where the students recorded less than half the questions accurately in 13-14. And through continuous improvement and looking at what you're doing, we pick some things and we say, okay, what do we want to do for an SLO to try and make it better? And if you come over to 15-16, you start to see some green appear. Green means the students are getting 80% or more of those questions correct. And that's the idea, is we want to live in the yellow and we want to dabble in the green. Carpentry program, same kind of sample. Now we've got a whole bunch. When we look at post-test scores, now we can start talking about in control and capable. When you look at the tools and accessories column, it would be the second standard. Pretty much all green and yellow, but it's all above the 80% mark. So it really doesn't matter which student takes this carpentry program. This instructor seems to have a curriculum in place that every student comes out very, very capable when it comes to that section of the test. Same with carpentry related mathematics. When you look at that, you're looking at 91, 100, and you're looking at 82. A lot of green. Same thing with exterior finish. So the numbers are pretty much staying close to the same, but the numbers are also very high. So in those cases, I would consider some of those standards in control and capable of excellence, or delivering sound curriculum and instruction over a multiple year period. And so that's one way that you can look at those things. You can also look at, NOCTI gives you some fantastic reports, and we're actually really proud of our partnership with them, because in my travels across the country, I see a lot of different states and a lot of different people trying to do assessment, and they just don't give the feedback that schools need for improvement. Here's a competency, and this is just a snippet from the reports, but this is a breakdown of one of the standards, and you can look at the specific competencies. Now, NOCTI tells you how many questions they ask, and then I actually put together just a little table that shows you, okay, what would 80% of that look like as a class mean? And 80% of 2 would be 1.6. All you have to do to figure out the second column is take the number times 8 and put a dot between the two numbers, and you're good. This is a comparison between 14-15, 15-16, and 16-17 post-test, and all I did was extract the class average score from the reports that are right inside the NOCTI. You can get them from the group report, or you can get them from the individual student reports. The class average is there. And so I put those all in a chart, and then what I'm really looking for is, okay, over a 3-year period, I want a 3-year average of what those numbers are. Is the number greater than 80, it gets green. If it's between 50 and 79, it would be yellow. And if it's below 50, it would be red. So that's another different way that you can look at the data from what's there. And I just threw this thing in an Excel spreadsheet, and it takes a little bit of time to do that. But it's certainly worth the conversation to realize that, over a 3-year period, doesn't matter what students come through the door, we don't do a very good job at defining classifications of reproduction of bacteria and viruses. And we also need to work on safety data sheets and OSHA, because those two over a 3-year period have low scores compared to all of the other things that are there. Different program. Again, we're looking at the same concept in a collision repair. I think this is collision repair. But again, we're looking for that 3-year average. And you can see on this report, now we've got our reds and our yellows and our greens. There are 3 areas there where consistently for a 3-year period of time, students don't do very well in there. But the class averages are almost the same. So, it's in control, but not necessarily capable. We've got 4 areas that light up green with class means of above 80% when you look at a 3-year average. 3-year average helps sometimes because somebody always wants to say, well, what about that one class that Satan sent that they just came in here and they wrecked all my data? Well, if you look at a 3-year average, that'll go up and that'll go down, and that's absolutely fine. And you can certainly say, we know why that class is the way they are, and I've got all this proof of that. But it went back up the next year when a different group of students came through. I did the same thing again, and look what they did with it. The other way that you can look at the information and the data is I create a custom report. And we do that free of charge for all the schools in Career Tech. They send me their, and there's an export file inside the Nocti system. They send me that file. I generate a report. That report is absolutely free. And it basically analyzes all your data. The methods behind that analysis were actually defined in some previous webinars that we did. So if you haven't seen those, you can maybe go back and take a peek at those webinars. So what you're looking at right now is a little clip from 2 reports. You're looking at last year's post-test report for 16-17 on the left, and you're looking at a 17-18 pre-test report. Now what my report does, it goes through the entire competencies within your Nocti assessment, and it breaks them down into how many competencies are being delivered with class means above 80, how much is between 51 and 79, and how much is 50 or below. And it sorts those in a list and prints out a really nice report so that you can actually see exactly where you are within your curriculum and in your instruction. And so if you look at it, it says hair shaping, then there's a number 3 between the 2 slashes. The 3 happens to be how many questions they ask. What you're looking for here is, think about this. In 16-17, I had a class that graduated. These students left. I can't do anything about that now. They're gone. But they had deficiencies on the left-hand side. There were 7 areas where they got less than half the questions correct as a whole group. Now I've got a new group that just came in. They're 17-18 students, and I just gave them my pre-test, and I looked at that report. What do you think the odds are that the 4 things on the right were present in the 7 things on the left? They all match. So that tells me you had students, they didn't do well. You have students right now, they're still not doing well. And if you don't change something in your curriculum instruction, it's going to be there again on your post-tests. And so, that's one way when you look at it. And again, all we're doing is diagnosing and prescribing areas that we probably need to change with some curriculum and some instruction. So once we do that, you can also look for trends between pre-test and post-test, just the mean scores. So when you take a look at the next slide, we actually have 2 reports. These are the reports that come right out of the Nocti system. They're the competency level task reports, they're the group level competency reports. And so it actually shows you the standards. We're looking at safety, shows you the class average. And so you can actually do a comparison of those 2 columns where the red arrows are. And really, we're looking for a couple of different things. We're looking for improvement between the pre-test and the post-test, which is the one to the left, the one to the right. We're looking for areas where it stayed the same, which is good. And we're looking for areas where it went down. I actually created a very simple little, it's another insert code. So if you understand the process of the data analysis before, we're going to use up arrows if the average increased. We're going to use a down arrow if it went down. We're going to use a dash if there was no change in the class mean. So if you apply those codes, you end up with this slide. So all we're doing is comparing the pre-test, which you can see on the left, and the pretest overlaps the post-test. So in the first competency, class mean went up. I went up from a 1.7 to a 2.1. Second competency, I went from a 1.9 to a 1.6. It went down. Well, that doesn't mean that you did a bad job teaching that. What that means, maybe, is we want to have a conversation and ask some questions about retention. When this was taught sometimes a year or two ago, everybody got it, but a year later or a couple of years later, when we do the post-test, they lost it. And so now within our curriculum instruction, how can we maybe reorganize some things so we revisit that competency a couple of times over a course of study to maybe allow that to either stay a dash so that they retain it or make it go up. But those are very simple things that you can do with reports that are in there, and you can actually see that 3 of the 7 competencies improved, 1 went down, and 3 stayed the same. Stayed the same is okay. Staying the same means whatever you taught and delivered, no matter how much time passed, they retained it. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. So now, when you look at all the data and you look at all the trends and you see these things that are read over multiple years, and you start talking about root cause analysis. So whenever you want to do a continuous improvement model, you really want to look at, why is it, why can't I deliver this piece of my curriculum with a higher class mean? Most of the time it's curriculum and instruction, because if you can deliver one area at a high level, you probably deliver other standards at that level too. It just comes down sometimes into how you're doing it. You might need to try something new. You got to utilize different text. Inside the NOCTI student books and even the teacher books that they provide, they actually list additional resources where information was used to develop the test questions when they worked with the subject matter experts. If you're teaching out of one particular piece of text and you've been teaching that piece of text for 5 years and the trend is there for 5 years, try using a different resource. Teach that chapter out of a different book. Most teachers have multiple books behind their desk as a resource. Take a look at the resources that are listed in the NOCTI book. Try something different. We talk about instructional strategies all the time. Instructional strategies are research-based. There's a lot of those we use inside the Max teaching framework to actually show how to deliver curriculum instruction at a very high effect when it comes to student achievement. We can look at assessment changes locally. We can do formative and we can do summative assessments. Does the data that you're getting from the NOCTI test match the summative tests or quizzes that you give throughout the year? And so you can really look at those kind of things. The last thing is projects. In the career tech world, we have projects or problems that students actually work on that really help cement in the theory behind a lesson. Sometimes when I work with teachers and they have a trend that's low, I'll say, do you actually have a project that the students produce a cold soup? If you were in a culinary program, and they said, no, we really don't do that. Well, let's put our heads together. Let's come up with a project and see if we can't cement the theory in a little better by having students work on it for that level too. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to actually offer those changes. You got to kind of look at it. I'm not sure how many people have ever heard of this story about the dead horse. But if you have a horse that's dead, you can whip the horse if you want to. You can yell at the horse if you want to. You can go get a different rider. You can try to motivate the horse. You can get it a new saddle. You can give it better food. You can throw more money at the problem. But ultimately, you're probably going to need a different horse. You got to try something new because the trend is telling you what you were doing wasn't working. And then, of course, you want to monitor the results. So, we want to constantly look at these trends. We want to implement and execute some sort of a treatment, a change, And then when the post-test comes out, we monitor to make sure those results gave us what we wanted. If they didn't give you what you wanted, then you just say, well, I tried that. That didn't work. I'm going to try this time. The last thing I want you to do is look at a trend and say, well, that trend's been there for 5 years. Oh, well, we'll just leave it alone. Try something. If it doesn't work, just say it didn't work. There's no harm, no foul in that. Then try something else. And of course, if it worked, I want you to celebrate that. And then I want you to do it again. If it worked that time, more than likely it will work the next time as well. But the trends will tell you, again, if you look at a 3-year average or however you want to look at the data, there's a lot of ways to do it. The trends in the data will tell you most of the time that you're looking at something in curriculum and instruction. Very rarely do I actually find that is in the students, because even the good students, whenever you have a really low class mean, they probably didn't score well either. And so really, that's pretty simple. I mean, that's the last piece of the puzzle. We looked at how you analyzed the data before. We looked at some different methods to look at that in previous spotlight sessions. We actually spotlighted the school and how they use this stuff. We've offered all those things, and the final piece was really diving in at the very end and looking for those trends over a period of time, and figuring out, asking why, and solving the problem. Our contact information is there if you have any questions about. I know this was a lot of stuff. If you have any questions, about getting your data analyzed, getting a free analysis, my email is at the bottom of that screen. And I'd be happy to take this to whatever level that you'd like.
Thank you so much, Todd, for going over all of that with us. As Todd mentioned a couple of times, we do have recordings of the previous webinars in this series on our website. If you go to nocti.org under resources, you'll find the publications page that has them listed. So I think that's it for today. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.